The sun was barely creeping over the horizon when Karen McAllister, the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek's HOA, decided to make my paralyzed brother's life a living hell. Picture this: a pristine suburban neighborhood, manicured lawns, and her shiny red pickup truck chained to my brother Tommy's modified van, his only way to get around. She didn't just tow it, she paraded it down the street like a trophy, screaming about parking violations, while Tommy, stuck in his wheelchair, watched from the driveway, helpless. That wasn't just a power trip, it was a declaration of war. But Karen didn't know who she was messing with. I'm Jake, Tommy's older brother, and I don't just fight back, I burn the whole damn castle down. By the time I was done, Karen wasn't just regretting her stunt, she was homeless, her mansion foreclosed, her life in ashes. Want to know how I turned her world upside down? Stick around, because this story's got more twists than a snake in a blender. Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below and smash that subscribe button to join the fight against nasty Karens like her. It all started on a muggy August morning in Willow Creek, a gated community where the houses gleamed like they were auditioning for a magazine cover. Tommy and I had moved here 3 years ago after his accident, a hit and run that left him paralyzed from the waist down. The van was his lifeline, custom built with a ramp and hand controls, parked in our driveway with a disabled placard as clear as day. But Karen McAllister, the HOA president with a perm as tight as her grip on the rulebook, had it out for us from day one. "You're lowering property values," she'd sneer, her voice dripping with that fake sweet venom only a true Karen can muster. She'd fine us for everything: grass too long by half an inch, trash cans out 10 minutes past curfew, even Tommy's wheelchair ramp, which she called an eyesore. I ignored her, paid the fines, and kept my head down. Tommy didn't need the stress, and I was too busy running my construction business to pick fights with a middle-aged dictator in yoga pants. But that morning, Karen crossed a line no one could ignore. I was at a job site when Tommy called, his voice shaking. "Jake, she's got my van. Karen's towing it right now." I could hear her in the background, yelling about unauthorized parking while neighbors gawked from their porches. I floored it home, my truck roaring through the gates of Willow Creek. By the time I got there, the scene was straight out of a bad movie. Karen's red F-150 was dragging Tommy's van down the street, the chain clanking like a death knell. Tommy was in the driveway, his face pale, gripping his wheelchair so hard his knuckles were white. A crowd had gathered, whispering, but no one dared step in. Karen stood by her truck, hands on her hips, her bleached blonde hair bouncing as she barked orders at a tow guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, storming toward her. She spun around, her eyes glinting with that smug, untouchable vibe she wore like a crown. "This van's been parked illegally for weeks, Jake. I warned you. Rules are rules." I pointed at the disabled placard dangling from the rearview mirror. "That's Tommy's lifeline, you heartless witch. He's paralyzed." She shrugged, her lips curling into a smirk. "Not my problem. Should have thought of that before you ignored my notices." I was 2 seconds from losing it, but Tommy grabbed my arm. "Jake, don't. She's not worth it." His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. I knew that look. He was hurt, humiliated, but he didn't want me starting a war. Not yet. I unclenched my fists and turned to the tow guy. "Unhook it! Now!" He hesitated, glancing at Karen, who snapped, "Do your job, or I'll have your license." The guy flinched, but started unhooking the chain. Karen's face went redder than her truck. "You'll regret this, Jake. I run this neighborhood. Cross me, and I'll bury you." I stepped closer, towering over her. "Try me." "Karen, you just woke up a beast." She scoffed, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just lit the fuse on her own destruction. I got Tommy's van back in the driveway, checked it for damage, and spent the rest of the day calming him down. He kept saying, "Let it go, Jake. She's just a bully." But I couldn't. Not this time. Karen didn't just attack Tommy's mobility, she attacked his dignity. And I'd spent my whole life protecting my little brother, first from schoolyard punks, then from a world that didn't give a damn about a guy in a wheelchair. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was a predator, and I was done playing nice. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a beer in one hand, my laptop open. Karen thought she ruled Willow Creek, but I was about to dig into her world and find every crack in her armor. First, I pulled up the HOA bylaws. Karen loved waving that rule book, like a Bible, but I'd bet my left arm she wasn't following it herself. The bylaws were a 50-page snooze fest, but I found gold. The HOA president had to disclose any conflicts of interest, especially financial ones. Karen owned a real estate company, McAllister Properties, and I'd heard rumors she was using her HOA clout to strong-arm sales in the neighborhood. That was my first lead. Next, I checked her public records. Karen's mansion, a gaudy 3-story monstrosity with marble columns and a fountain, was mortgaged to the hilt. She was swimming in debt, $1.2 million to be exact, with payments. She was barely making. A plan started forming. If I could hit her where it hurt, her wallet, I could bring her down without throwing a punch. But I needed more. I called up my buddy Mike, a private investigator, who owed me a favor after I built his office for cost. "Mike, I need dirt on Karen McAllister. Deep dirt. Financials, deals, anything shady." Mike chuckled. "HOA Karens are the worst. Give me a week." While Mike dug, I started working the neighborhood. Karen had enemies, lots of them. Mrs. Lopez, who'd been fined for her grandkid's lemonade stand, told me Karen had tried to pressure her into selling her house through McAllister Properties. Old man Carter said Karen had jacked up his fines until he agreed to list with her. A pattern was emerging, and it stank worse than a backed-up sewer. By the end of the week, Mike came through. "Your girl's been naughty," he said, sliding me a folder. Karen was funneling HOA funds into her real estate business, skimming dues to pay her mortgage. She'd also forged signatures on contracts to flip properties, pocketing commissions while strong-arming residents. It was fraud, plain and simple, and enough to get her kicked out of the HOA and maybe into a courtroom. But I wasn't stopping there. Karen wanted to play dirty. I'd play dirtier. I started buying up her mortgage notes through a shell company I set up. If she missed a payment, I'd own her precious mansion, and I knew just how to make her miss it. The next HOA meeting was a week away, and I was ready to strike. I spent days preparing, gathering evidence, rallying neighbors who'd been burned by Karen's reign of terror. Tommy didn't know the half of it. I didn't want him worrying, but as I tucked him in that night, he grabbed my hand. "Jake, don't do anything stupid, promise me." I forced a grin. "Stupid? Me? Never." But my mind was racing. Karen had chained Tommy's van to her truck, humiliated him in front of the whole neighborhood. She thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn what happens when you poke a bear with a stick. The HOA meeting was held in the Willow Creek clubhouse, a sterile room with beige walls and a faint smell of stale coffee. The place was packed, neighbors squeezed into folding, chairs, whispering about the showdown they could sense was coming. Karen sat at the head table, her perm pristine, her lips painted a garish red, flipping through her rulebook like a general preparing for battle. I stood at the back, arms crossed, my folder of evidence tucked under my jacket. Tommy was at home. He didn't need to see this circus, but I could still hear his voice in my head, urging me to stay calm. Calm wasn't in my playbook tonight. Karen had chained his van to her truck, humiliated him, and tonight I was going to start dismantling her empire. Karen banged her gavel, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Order! Let's get this meeting started. First item, fines for non-compliance." She shot me a smug look, like she was daring me to step up. I waited, letting her dig her own grave. She rattled off a list of petty violations. Mrs. Lopez's flower pots were too colourful, Mr. Carter's mailbox was non-regulation, and the room grew restless. People were tired of her nonsense, but fear kept them quiet. Karen ruled with an iron fist, and everyone knew crossing her meant fines, harassment, or worse. But I wasn't everyone. When she opened the floor for comments, I stepped forward, my boots echoing on the linoleum. "I've got something to say." Karen. Her eyes narrowed, but she waved me on, probably thinking she could shut me down. "Go ahead, Jake, but keep it brief. We've got rules to enforce." I smirked, pulling out my folder. "Oh, I'm all about rules, like the one that says the HOA president can't use her position for personal gain." The room went dead silent. Karen's smile froze, her fingers tightening on her gavel. "What are you blabbering about?" she snapped, but her voice had a nervous edge. I held up a stack of papers, bank records, contracts, emails Mike had dug up. "You've been skimming HOA dues to prop up your failing real estate business, Karen, funneling money to McAllister. Properties, forcing neighbors to sell through you with threats of fines. That sound familiar?" I tossed the papers onto the table, letting them scatter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Lopez stood up, her voice shaking. "She told me I'd lose my house if I didn't list with her." Mr. Carter chimed in. "She doubled my fines until I caved." Karen's face went from red to purple, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You have no proof," she shrieked, slamming her gavel so hard it cracked. "This is slander. I'll sue you into the ground, Jake." I leaned in, my voice low and cold. "Sue me? With what money, Karen? Your mansion's one missed payment from foreclosure. And guess who's holding the note?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear. She didn't know about the shell company yet, but she was starting to realize she wasn't untouchable. The room erupted, neighbors shouting, demanding answers. Karen tried to gavel them into silence, but it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a teaspoon. The meeting ended in chaos, with Karen storming out, vowing revenge. "You'll pay for this, Jake. You and that crippled brother of yours." The word crippled hit like a punch, and I lunged, but Mike grabbed me. "Not now, man. Stick to the plan." He was right. Punching her would feel good, but it wouldn't hit her where it hurt. I watched her peel out of the parking lot in her red truck, her tires squealing. She thought she could still win. She was wrong. The next morning, I got a call from Mike. "You stirred the hornet's nest, buddy. Karen's been calling everyone, trying to rally support. She's claiming you fabricated the evidence." I laughed, pouring my coffee. "Let her try. We've got her dead to rights." Mike's voice got serious. "There's more. She's been digging into you and Tommy, found some old records from your construction business, permits you didn't. File right back in Luzhny. She's threatening to report you to the state." I froze, the mug halfway to my lips. Those permits were a mistake, a rookie screw-up from when I was starting out. I'd fixed it years ago, but in Karen's hands, it could be a weapon. "She's desperate," Mike said. "Watch your back." I didn't tell Tommy about the permits. He was already stressed, spending his days in physical therapy, trying to rebuild what little strength he had. Instead, I doubled down. I called a lawyer, Sarah, who specialized in HOA disputes. She was a shark in a pantsuit with a grin that said she loved tearing people like Karen apart. "This is a slam dunk," she said, flipping through my evidence. "Fraud, embezzlement, coercion, she's done, but we need to move fast. She'll try to cover her tracks." Sarah filed a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board and sent a cease and desist to Karen, demanding she step down as president. That was just the opening shot. Meanwhile, I kept buying up Karen's mortgage notes. Her bank was happy to sell. They knew she was a bad bet. By the end of the week, my shell company owned 80% of her debt. One missed payment, and I'd foreclose. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. She started a smear campaign, plastering flyers around the neighborhood, calling me a liar and a thug. She even got her buddy on the local news, a slick reporter named Chad, who ran a story about HOA disputes tearing Willow Creek apart. Chad painted Karen as the victim, a dedicated community leader, under attack by an angry contractor. I had to hand it to her. She was good at playing the martyr. But I had my own moves. I organized a neighborhood meeting, no HOA nonsense, just residents in Mrs. Lopez's backyard. 50 people showed up, more than I'd expected. I laid it all out. Karen's fraud, her threats, the forged contracts. I passed around copies of the evidence, letting the truth do the talking. By the end, people were furious. She fined me for my dog's barking, then tried to buy my house, one guy yelled. "She told me my kid's swing set was tacky and upped my dues," said another. The tide was turning, and Karen was about to drown in it. Then came the first twist. Late that night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Back off, or Tommy pays." My blood ran cold. I showed it to Mike, who traced the number to a burner phone. "It's Karen," he said. "She's unhinged." I didn't sleep that night, sitting by Tommy's window with a baseball bat, my phone ready to call 911. Karen wasn't just fighting for her mansion, she was fighting dirty, and now she was threatening my brother. I wasn't just going to foreclose her house anymore, I was going to make sure she lost everything. The next day, I met with Sarah and Mike to tighten the screws. Sarah had filed a lawsuit against Karen personally, not just the HOA, for fraud and emotional distress. "We're going for blood," she said, her eyes gleaming. Mike had more dirt. Karen had a side hustle flipping foreclosed homes, using insider info from the HOA to target vulnerable residents. It was illegal as hell, and we had the paper trail to prove it. I also got a call from the bank. Karen had missed her mortgage payment. The clock was ticking. I could foreclose any day now, but I wanted to wait for the perfect moment when it would hit her hardest. Karen, though, wasn't done. She showed up at my house that evening, pounding on the door like a woman possessed. Tommy was in the living room, watching TV, and I told him to stay put. I opened the door, and there she was, eyes wild, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. "You think you can ruin me, Jake?" she hissed. "I've got friends in high places. You're nothing but a two-bit builder with a grudge." I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my cool. "Funny, Karen. Last I checked, you're the one stealing from the neighborhood to pay for your tacky fountain." Her face twisted, and she jabbed a finger at me. "You'll regret this, both of you." She glanced past me, toward Tommy, and I stepped forward, forcing her back. "Threaten my brother again and you won't just lose your house, you'll lose your teeth." She stormed off, but I knew this wasn't over. Karen was a cornered animal, and those are the most dangerous. I installed security cameras around the house, told Tommy to stay vigilant, and kept pushing. The lawsuit was gaining traction, the neighbors were rallying, and Karen's empire was crumbling. But I had a gut feeling she was planning something big, something to hit back before I could pull the trigger on the foreclosure. What I didn't know was that the next twist would come from someone I never expected, someone who'd been watching from the shadows all along. The air in Willow Creek was thick with tension, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Karen's empire was teetering, her neighbors turning against her, her mansion one missed payment from my grasp. But that text, "back off or Tommy pays," kept me up at night, my baseball bat never far from reach. I'd installed cameras, had Mike watching Karen's every move, and Sarah was building a case that could land her in jail. Still, I knew Karen wasn't done. She was a snake, and snakes don't just slither away, they strike. What I didn't expect was the wild card about to walk into this war, someone who'd flipped the script and make me question everything. It was a Tuesday evening when I got a knock at the door. Tommy was in his room, fiddling with his model cars, a hobby that kept him sane. I checked the camera feed, expecting Karen or one of her cronies, but it was a stranger. A woman, late 40s, with sharp cheekbones and a nervous energy, clutching a manila envelope. I opened the door, keeping my guard up. "Jake," she said, her voice low, like she was afraid someone was listening. "I'm Lisa. I used to work for Karen at McAllister Properties. We need to talk." I didn't trust her, not yet, but something in her eyes, fear mixed with fury, told me she wasn't here to play games. I let her in, glancing outside to make sure no one was watching. Lisa sat at my kitchen table, her hands trembling as she slid the envelope toward me. "I quit last week," she said. "Karen's unhinged. She's been screaming about you, saying she'll destroy you and your brother." I couldn't stay silent anymore. I opened the envelope and my jaw dropped. It was a gold mine. Internal emails, accounting ledgers, even audio recordings of Karen berating clients, threatening to ruin them if they didn't sell through her. One email detailed a scheme to inflate HOA fines to force out elderly residents, then buy their homes at a discount. Another had Karen bragging to a colleague about bleeding the neighborhood dry to keep her mansion. "How'd you get this?" I asked, my voice tight. Lisa's eyes hardened. "I was her assistant for 5 years. I saw everything. When she changed your brother's van, I knew I had to do something. She's a monster." I leaned back, processing. Lisa wasn't just a whistleblower, she was a grenade, and I was about to pull the pin. "Why now?" I asked. "Why risk it?" She looked down, her voice breaking. "My mum was one of those elderly residents. Karen pressured her into selling her house, then flipped it for triple. Mum's in a cheap apartment now, barely scraping by. I thought I was just doing my job, until I saw what she did to Tommy." I nodded, my respect for her growing. "You're in danger, Lisa. Karen doesn't play nice." She gave a bitter laugh. "I know, that's why I'm here. I want her gone as much as you do." Lisa's evidence was dynamite, but it came with a problem. It implicated her, too. She'd signed off on some of Karen's deals, unaware they were illegal. "I'll testify," she said, "but I need protection. Karen's got connections, cops, lawyers, even a judge." That explained her friends in high places brag. I called Sarah and Mike and we met at a diner outside town to avoid Karen's spies. Sarah pored over the documents, her eyes lighting up like a kid on Christmas. "This isn't just fraud," she said. "It's racketeering. We can take this federal." Mike grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Time to bury her, Jake." But I wasn't celebrating yet. Karen's threat against Tommy was still out there, and now Lisa was a target too. I moved fast. Sarah filed an emergency motion to remove Karen as HOA president, citing Lisa's evidence. The state board agreed to an investigation, and Karen was suspended pending a hearing. The neighborhood buzzed. People were openly defying her now, ignoring her fines, even spray painting "Karen's a crook," her precious fountain. But Karen wasn't out. She hired a shark of a lawyer named Vince, a guy with a reputation for chewing up small-town cases and spitting them out. Vince sent me a letter accusing me of defamation and demanding I drop the lawsuit or face severe consequences. I laughed, framing the letter on my wall. "Bring it, Vince," I muttered. Then Karen escalated. One morning, I woke to find Tommy's van spray-painted with "cripple" in red letters. Tommy saw it before I could cover it, his face crumpling. "Why does she hate me so much?" he whispered. I wanted to punch a wall, but I hugged him instead. "It's not you, Tommy. It's her. She's scared, and she's lashing out." I called the cops, but they dragged their feet, Karen's connections at work. Mike traced the paint to a hardware store near Karen's house, but without a witness. It wasn't enough. I upgraded our security, adding motion sensors and a panic button for Tommy. "You're not fighting her alone," he said, his voice firm. "I'm in this too." I hated putting him through this, but he was right. We were a team. Lisa's evidence gave us the upper hand, but Karen's next move blindsided me. She filed a countersuit, claiming I'd forged the documents and accusing Lisa of being a disgruntled employee with a grudge. She even dragged Tommy into it, alleging his illegal parking had caused emotional distress to the neighborhood. It was laughable, but Vince was good. He spun a story that painted Karen as a saint under siege. The local news ate it up, running a follow-up story with Karen crying fake tears, clutching a photo of her dog like she was auditioning for an Oscar. "I just want peace," she sobbed. I gagged, but the damage was done. Some neighbors started, doubting me, whispering I'd gone too far. I wasn't backing down. I met with Lisa again, who was now living in a motel to avoid Karen's wrath. "She called me," Lisa said, her voice shaky. "Said if I testify, she'll make sure I never work again." I clenched my fists. "She's bluffing. We've got her cornered." But Lisa's fear was real, and I couldn't ignore it. I hired a security guy to watch her, and Mike dug deeper into Karen's connections. He found her judge friend was a golf buddy of Vince's, and they'd been seen at Karen's mansion late at night. "She's building a fortress," Mike said, "but fortresses fall. The foreclosure was my ace in the hole. Karen missed another payment, and my shell company was ready to pounce. But I held off, waiting for the HOA hearing. I wanted her to lose everything in front of the people she'd terrorized." Sarah prepped Lisa to testify, coaching her to stay calm under Vince's cross-examination. "He'll try to rattle you," Sarah warned. "Don't let him." Lisa nodded, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was risking everything, just like me. The night before the hearing, I got another text from the burner phone. "You'll wish you'd stopped." This time, it came with a photo, a grainy shot of Tommy in his wheelchair, taken from across the street. My heart stopped. I checked the cameras, but whoever took it was gone. I sat with Tommy, not telling him about the photo, but he knew something was wrong. "Jake, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, trying to joke. I forced a smile, just planning Karen's funeral. But inside I was raging. Karen had gone too far, and now it was personal. The hearing was a circus. Karen showed up in a designer suit, Vince at her side, smirking like they'd already won. The room was packed with neighbors, reporters, even a few cops who looked too cozy with Vince. Sarah presented our case, laying out the fraud, the forged contracts, the embezzlement. Lisa took the stand, her voice steady, as she detailed Karen's schemes. Vince tried to tear her apart, calling her a liar, but Lisa held her ground, her anger outweighing her fear. "I saw her destroy lives," she said, staring at Karen. "She doesn't care who she hurt." The room murmured, and Karen's smug mask slipped. Then came the twist. During a break, a man approached me, grey suit, slick hair, looking like he'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. "Jake, I'm Richard," he said, handing me a card. "I represent a group of investors. We've been watching Karen for years. She's been laundering money through her real estate deals, and we want in on your fight." I blinked, caught off guard. "Why me?" I asked. Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're winning, and we want her gone before she drags us down with her." My gut twisted. These weren't allies, they were vultures, and they knew. Something about Karen I didn't. The question was, could I trust them, or were they just another trap? The HOA hearing room was still buzzing from Lisa's testimony, the air electric with anticipation. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her designer suit now looking like a costume on a sinking ship. Vince whispered in her ear, his slick grin fading as the state board members scribbled notes. I stood in the back, my heart pounding, Richard's card burning a hole in my pocket. His offer, investors with dirt on Karen's money laundering, could be the final nail in her coffin, but it smelled like a deal with the devil. I didn't trust him, not one bit, but I was too deep to back out now. Karen had chained Tommy's van, spray-painted it with hate, threatened his life. This wasn't just about her mansion anymore. It was about justice, and I was going to make sure she felt every ounce of it. Sarah called her final witness, Mr. Carter, who shuffled to the stand, his old eyes blazing. Karen threatened to foreclose. "My home if I didn't sell to her," he said, his voice steady. "She said my mailbox was non-compliant and fined me $500 a month until I signed." The room gasped, neighbors nodding, their own stories bubbling up. Vince tried to object, but the board shut him down. Karen's face was a mask of rage, her fingers digging into the table like she could claw her way out of this. When Sarah rested our case, the board adjourned to deliberate, and I caught Karen's eye. She mouthed, "You're done," but it was hollow. She was the one drowning. Outside, Richard cornered me again, his voice smooth as oil. "Jake, we can end this today. Our investors have proof Karen's been washing money for some heavy hitters, offshore accounts, shell companies, the works. Hand over your evidence, and we'll take her down for good." I studied him, his polished shoes, his too-perfect smile. "What's in it for you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Let's just say Karen's been a thorn in our side. We want her out of the game." Mike, standing nearby, muttered, "Sounds like they're cleaning up their own mess." I nodded, my gut screaming to keep Richard at arm's length, but his intel could bury Karen deeper than I ever could. I told him, "I'll think about it," and walked away, my mind racing. That night, I sat with Tommy, filling him in. He'd been stronger lately, insisting on being part of the fight, but the photo from the burner phone still haunted me. "Jake, you don't need shady investors," he said, his voice firm. "You've got enough to finish her." He was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard knew something bigger, something that could protect us from Karen's next move. I called Mike, who'd been digging into Richard's group. "They're real estate tycoons," he said. "Big players, but dirty. Karen was their front, flipping properties to hide their cash. They're scared she'll talk if she goes down." That changed everything. Richard wasn't helping me, he was covering his boss's tracks. The next morning, the board's decision came. Karen was out as HOA president, effective immediately. The room erupted in cheers, neighbors hugging, some crying. Karen stormed out, Vince trailing her like a whipped dog. But I wasn't celebrating yet. I'd gotten a call from the bank. Karen missed her third payment. My shell company could foreclose. Her mansion now. I told Sarah to hold off filing the papers. I want her to see it coming, I said. Sarah grinned. You're ruthless, Jake. I like it. But Lisa, still jumpy from Karen's threats, wasn't so sure. She's not done, she whispered. She's got nothing left to lose. Lisa was right. That night, my security cameras caught someone sneaking around our house, hooded, carrying a gas can. I grabbed my bat and ran outside, but they were gone, leaving a scorched patch on our lawn. The message was clear. Karen was escalating to arson. I called the cops, who finally took it seriously, dusting for prints and pulling nearby traffic cam footage. Mike traced the gas can to a purchase at a gas station near Karen's house, caught on CCTV. It wasn't Karen, it was Vince, her lawyer. She's outsourcing her dirty work, Mike said. We need to end this now. I met Richard one last time at a dive bar far from Willow Creek. Give me the proof, I said, and I'll hand over my evidence. He slid me a USB drive. Bank records, wire transfers, Karen's signatures on deals going back years. It's enough to put her away for a decade. I checked the drive on my laptop. Offshore accounts linked to Karen, millions in dirty money. But one name kept popping up. Richard's company. They weren't just investors. They were her partners. And now they were throwing her under the bus to save themselves. I handed him a copy of my evidence, keeping the originals. Pleasure, doing business, he said, but I knew he'd burn me if he could. The next day, I pulled the trigger. My shell company filed for foreclosure, and sheriff's deputies showed up at Karen's mansion with eviction papers. Neighbors gathered, filming, as she screamed, "This is my home, you can't do this." The deputies were unmoved, hauling her designer bags to the curb. I watched from across the street, feeling a grim satisfaction. Karen locked eyes with me, her face twisted with hate. "You think this is over, Jake? I'll come for you." I smirked. Good luck from the cardboard box you'll be living in, but the real twist came that night. Mike called, his voice urgent. "Jake, turn on the news." I flipped on the TV, and there was Karen, in handcuffs, being led into a police station. The headline read, "Local HOA President Arrested in Money Laundering Sting." Richard's evidence had gone to the feds, and they'd moved faster than I expected. Karen wasn't just homeless, she was facing federal charges, her empire exposed as a front for a bigger criminal ring. The news anchor mentioned unnamed investors cooperating with authorities, and I knew Richard's group had sold her out to save their own skins. I thought it was over, but then came the final blow. Lisa called, sobbing. "Jake, they found my mum's house in the records. Karen forged her signature to sell it. The feds are giving it back." I was stunned. Karen's downfall had undone one of her worst crimes, giving Lisa's mum a chance to reclaim her home. Tommy wheeled into the room, grinning. "Told you we'd win, Jake." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Yeah, but you didn't tell me it'd be this wild." The neighborhood threw a party at Mrs. Lopez's house, celebrating Karen's arrest and the end of her reign. Kids played on the lawn, adults toasted to freedom, and Tommy even cracked a joke about painting "Karen's a crook" on her old fountain. But as I sipped my beer, Richard's card caught my eye on the table. He'd gotten what he wanted. Karen gone, his boss is safe, but I knew he'd be watching me. I burned the card, vowing to keep my guard up. Karen was down, but snakes like Richard were still out there. As for Willow Creek, we elected Mrs. Lopez as the new HOA president, and she scrapped half the rules on day one. Tommy's van stayed parked in our driveway, untouched, his placard gleaming. I sold Karen's mansion to a nice family, donating half the proceeds to a disability advocacy group in Tommy's name. Karen? Last I heard, she was in a cell, her perm deflated, her empire dust. But I'd learned one thing: revenge feels good, but protecting family feels better, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.